This is very interesting because it seems to me that when companies are making a lot of money, and let's be clear, companies right now are making a lot of money. Yeah, of course they're right sizing and downsizing, but a result of that is they're actually making decent money, specifically if they focus on the short term and focus on maybe the core. But when companies are making a lot of money, the motivation to invest in Foresight, to think deeply about the longer term future, might be low, yeah, because we're making good money. So again, I'm on a short term 10 years, so why should I change? And it appears to me that it follows the typical cycle. Yeah, good times create weak people. Weak people create hard times create tough people, and tough people then again create good times. So is it maybe just that we are somewhere in that cycle, in that generational cycle, maybe also generational cycle of companies, and that we're just about to coming out of good times, creating, I don't want to say weak people, but at least maybe weaker strategies and short-term strategies that actually we still need to run into hard times before then, and then calling for foresight and for long-term thinking before we actually see more strategies, long-term strategies, except for the family-owned businesses. Is that just what we're running into?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I would first answer, I hope not. As you know, on multiple fronts, we're trying to understand the bigger picture here. We also try to understand what can be done. One of those vantage points is the World Economic Forum. A colleague of mine in the advisory board of the World Economic Forum, Amy Webb, recently wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review, which I really liked, where she said, well, we need to bring real strategic foresight back to strategy. So strategy today is often not strategy in its true sense. So many would argue that when we see strategies like downsizing, etc., that's actually a tactical move. So it's not really asking what you ask in strategy as where do I want to be? What is the business model which brings me there? What are the environmental conditions which are favorable or unfavorable for me? How do I make my business model interact with the environment? It's more of a tactical question, like you were suggesting. Let's make sure that we have enough cash flow to invest into new things. But we don't even know what it is we're going to invest in, but let's downsize first. The other vantage point which I have is here at EDEC. We just launched a new strategy which we call Generation 2050. And why we do this is because by 2050 we need to, as humanity, solve many issues. We want to make sure that we bring education to everyone on the planet. As humanity, that's not our goals, that's the goals from the UN and others. But as humanity, this is very important. We want to make sure that we decarbonize our industries. And this is something which for us as a business school is also resonating with the fact that people who are born today are the ones which will in 25 years be the ones we graduate and which go out there and inherit hopefully a stable planet, a stable system. So from this vantage point, I'm going to have the privilege to lead a new center which we're creating, the Center for Net Positive Business, which invites for deeper reflections about what is the role of business. And as we speak, we are also in a situation where more and more firms and their business models are scrutinized, are made sometimes also impossible. One case in point was a case which I had the joy of watching from close by when I was still a professor in Denmark, which is the case of a company called Dong Energy, which is today known as a company called Ørsted. Dong Energy was created in the oil crisis in the 1970s, where Europe wanted to become independent from oil from the Middle East, and we started to drill for oil and gas in the North Sea. It's a company which which fulfilled its objectives. It made Denmark not only independent from other sources of energy, but also very rich and successful. But in the 2000s, from a Danish perspective, you see that this business model comes to an end, is what we also like to refer to a business platform which has no future. It's a legacy business platform, but you understand there's no future for it. It also took for this company a real shock. They were meant to build a coal-fired power plant 2008 in Germany, and there was so much opposition to this that they eventually abandoned this project. And with that also created a new strategy around going and creating a market which was not viable at that time, which was the market for offshore wind. At that time in 2009, the technology was not ready. The understanding on how do I maintain over long periods of time the productivity of offshore wind farms was not ready. And at that time, they said, we're going to create a strategy which ultimately brings us from 85% fossil fuel in our portfolio and 15% renewables to the opposite, to 85% renewables and 15% fossil fuels. And in order to do that, they understood that they need to believe in technologies too mature, for example. And they also understood that they can't just rely on the market to do this. So at that time, they placed an order with Siemens and said, we're going to procure 500 offshore windmills, which are very big windmills, and which at that time was, this order exceeded actually the global installed park of windmills. So an extremely bold decision. And through this bold decision, they were then capable of bringing the prices, what we like to refer to as the levelized cost of energy, down to make this energy competitive with fossil fuels. And with that pioneered this new way of producing energy, and then also exporting it globally, opening essentially also the US market. And this is one of the cases which I like to ask my students, what would it take you when you go out there as a manager into the real world? What would it take you to take these bold decisions together with your colleagues who sit with you on the board? And I think this is the crucial question we need to ask all of us, and we need to ask also the leaders of our organizations. I think we are entering into an era where it's simply not good enough just to optimize your own organization, let alone, just optimizing your own career and your own end of year bonuses. Yeah. Today, you're going to be chased. There's much more transparency. It's also a very interesting platform out there from a Finnish startup, which is called the Upright platform, which tries to capture what is your footprint as an organization in terms of societal advances. Do you give jobs? Do you make inventions? Do you have impacts on the environment, etc.? And put all this in the score. Just one of these examples of this transparency which leaders in the corporate world have not been used to, and which is coming very fast to the picture. And I think ultimately we need to ask ourselves, how can it be that every time in June, for example, in France, we realize, we spent already all the resources which would be fair to spend as France. So I'm talking here about this famous World Overshoot Day. Globally, we basically consume in a way that we need more than the world which we have, which means we're living on the expenses of the next generation. And there's other frameworks which show very clearly what should be the yardsticks, what should be the indicators which inform our work and our decision making.
I think that is first of all a very compelling case study and very challenging questions for your students to answer, but it puts them into the right mind frame. to think more deeply. So there's clearly a gap, right? Because we have this, and then we have a situation in practice where we often still can observe that foresight even falls short because it isn't directly tied to business results. There is no profit and loss P&L responsibility, and it often even does not yet guide market expansion, M&A strategy, innovation roadmaps whatsoever. So one of the most basic forms is basically starting with trend spotting, starting with technology scouting, including startup scouting, maybe creating trend reports that can be 80 pages long or 80 slides long or whatever. And then, these reports are getting passed on to whomever. And there might be even great content in there. Yeah, so it might be a great study about something. Sometimes it's a little bit too high level. Sometimes it is very deep and super interesting. But then it's kind of my responsibility ends here. Yeah, so I created the report. I'm done with quote unquote foresighting. And now it's the job of enter a specific target group or persona here. Yeah, that should kind of deal with this foresight thing. So, we have this long-term thinking, and we clearly have the need for that. But then we have also corporate reality and practice where we see those trend reports getting created, then, sent by email to somebody. And then, next year I'm just going to do the same. And I hope that I still have, 3 other people working for me in this team. So that's clear not enough. There is a gap.